I'm naked. She whispered. The billionaire carried his contract bride, losing control. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to the main character. The sound of glass shattering cut through the quiet wing of the mansion. Ethan Blackwood stopped mid-step. This part of the house was supposed to be empty. The guests from the family reception were still downstairs, sipping champagne and pretending they did not despise one another. His contract wife had excused herself minutes ago, saying she needed air. Then he heard it again. A sharp breath, a muffled gasp. Ethan turned toward the guest suite without thinking. The door was half closed. Inside, the lights were dim. A floor lamp had been knocked over, its warm glow spilling across the marble tiles. Broken glass glittered like ice near the bathroom doorway. And there she was, his contract bride, pressed flat against the wall, arms crossed tightly over her chest, skin pale, eyes wide with panic. Her voice barely made it past her lips. "I am naked," she whispered. Ethan froze. For 3 months, every moment of their marriage had been governed by ink and signatures. No physical contact, no private boundaries crossed, no mistakes. Those rules were written clearly on the first page of the contract now locked inside his office safe. But the rules did not account for broken glass. They did not account for fear. "Do not move," Ethan said, his voice low and controlled, though his pulse was already racing. "There is glass on the floor." She swallowed hard. Her bare feet were inches from the shards. One wrong step and blood would follow. The idea sent a sharp twist through his chest that surprised him. "I cannot reach my robe," she said. "It is by the door." The door was across the glass. Ethan exhaled slowly. This was not a boardroom. There was no negotiation here. "I am coming in," he said. Her breath hitched. "The contract." "I know what the contract says," he interrupted, more firmly than he intended. "This is not about that. DLRs." He stepped forward, carefully avoiding the broken pieces, and stopped in front of her. He kept his eyes on her face, not allowing them to drift, not allowing himself to think about the warmth of her skin or the way she trembled. "Close your eyes," he said. She did. Ethan bent down, slid one arm behind her knees and the other around her back, and lifted her off the ground. The moment her weight settled against him, his body reacted before his mind could stop it. She was warm, too warm, real in a way no contract could define. Her fingers clenched into the fabric of his jacket, instinctive, trusting. "I am sorry," she murmured, her forehead resting against his shoulder. For a split second, Ethan forgot how to breathe. He carried her across the room, each step deliberate, controlled, every muscle tight with restraint. When he reached the bed, he gently lowered her onto the edge and grabbed the robe, wrapping it around her without hesitation. Only then did he step back. Only then did he remember who he was supposed to be. A billionaire CEO. A man who made decisions without emotion. A husband on paper only. She looked up at him, cheeks flushed, eyes still shaken. "Thank you," she said quietly. Ethan nodded once, his jaw tight. But as he turned away, one truth settled heavily in his chest. That contract had just cracked, and he was not sure he wanted to fix it. Ethan did not sleep that night. The guest wing was silent again, as if nothing had happened, as if broken glass and whispered fear had not cracked something inside him. He stood by the window of his study, the city lights below stretching across the skyline, sharp and cold. This marriage was never meant to feel like this. 3 months earlier, everything had been clean, logical, necessary. Ethan Blackwood did not believe in coincidences. He believed in leverage, timing, and control. And when his grandfather's trust agreement surfaced during the quarterly board review, it was clear what the family wanted. Marry within the year, or lose voting control of Blackwood Industries. They called it tradition. The board called it stability. Ethan called it blackmail. He had refused every carefully selected heiress they pushed across the table. Not because they lacked beauty or pedigree, but because every smile came with calculation. Every touch came with expectation. He needed a solution that would end the pressure without surrendering himself. That was when her name appeared in his assistant's report. A struggling family business. A woman with no social ties to his world. No interest in power. No interest in him. Perfect. The proposal had been delivered plainly, without romance. A contract marriage. 3 months minimum. Public appearances only. Generous compensation. She had listened in silence, hands folded in her lap, eyes steady but wary. You are asking me to play a role, she said. Yes, Ethan replied. Nothing more. She hesitated. Not because she wanted him, but because she needed the money. Her mother's tailoring shop was weeks from foreclosure. Generations of work were about to disappear behind a bank notice. Finally, she nodded once. Then we do this by rules, she said. That same afternoon, they signed. Ethan opened the safe now and pulled the contract out, laying it flat across his desk. Clause 1. This marriage is a legal and public arrangement only. Clause 2. No physical intimacy of any kind. Clause 3. Private lives remain private. He stared at Clause 2 longer than he wanted to admit. Across the hall, she sat on the edge of the bed, robe wrapped tightly around herself. Her hands still shook slightly as she replayed the sound of glass, the way the floor had vanished beneath her certainty. She had agreed to be invisible, to be useful, to never matter. That was the deal. And yet, when he had lifted her, there was no calculation in his arms. No performance. Only instinct. She pressed her palm flat against her chest, steadying her breath. This changes nothing, she whispered to herself, but the words did not hold. The next morning, they sat across from each other at the long breakfast table, sunlight pouring in through the windows. A silent truce hovered between them. I have the board gala tomorrow night, Ethan said, eyes on his coffee. You will attend. She nodded. Of course. A pause. What happened last night, he added carefully, was an exception. She met his gaze. Calm, controlled. I agree, she said. The contract still stands. Relief should have followed. Instead, Ethan felt something tighten. Because for the first time, the contract felt less like protection and more like a lie they were both pretending to believe. The contract was revised that afternoon. Ethan insisted on it, not because the terms had changed, but because clarity mattered. In his world, clarity was safety. He sat at the long table in his study, sleeves rolled up, legal documents spread neatly before him. Across from him, his contract bride sat straight-backed, composed, her hands folded the way they always were when she was bracing herself. This is not a renegotiation, Ethan said. It is a reaffirmation. She nodded once. Then we should read everything again. He respected that. Clause by clause, they went through it. Not rushing, not skipping. Clause 1. Public appearances as husband and wife for a minimum of 3 months, including corporate events, family functions, and press appearances. Clause 2. No physical intimacy of any kind, except when required for public presentation. Clause 3. No interference in each other's professional decisions. Clause 4. Absolute confidentiality. She paused at that one. If this gets out, she said quietly, my family business will not survive the attention. Ethan met her gaze. It will not get out. He signed first, his handwriting precise. Then, he slid the pen across the table. She hesitated only a second before signing her name. The ink dried quickly, sealing something that already felt heavier than paper. That evening marked the beginning of her preparation. The gala was not just another event. It was the board's favorite weapon. A room full of polished smiles and quiet judgment, where wives were evaluated as carefully as balance sheets. Ethan's stylist arrived first, followed by a posture consultant and a quiet woman whose job was to teach her how to stand without shrinking. You do not apologize with your body, the woman said gently. You take space. She practiced walking across the marble floor in heels that cost more than her mother's monthly rent. She stumbled once, caught herself, and lifted her chin without being prompted. Ethan watched from the doorway, arms crossed, saying nothing. When she laughed at a small mistake, not embarrassed but genuine, something shifted again. Later, alone in the hallway, she adjusted the simple necklace Ethan had provided. Not extravagant. Intentional. You did not have to do all this, she said. This is part of the arrangement, he replied. She looked at him, searching. Is it? He did not answer. The next morning, they rehearsed introductions. Names, titles, smiles that lasted exactly 3 seconds. At one point, she corrected him. My last name, she said calmly. You pronounced it wrong. He blinked, then repeated it correctly. Thank you, she said. No one had corrected him in years. That night, as she stood in front of the mirror in the guest suite, gown hanging perfectly, she barely recognized herself. Not because of the dress, but because she looked steady, not borrowed, not pretending. Downstairs, Ethan adjusted his cufflinks, aware of an unfamiliar tension in his chest. This was supposed to be performance, but performances did not usually demand this much truth. As the car pulled up to the entrance of the gala venue, Ethan offered his arm, automatically. She placed her hand on it without hesitation, not because the contract required it, but because, for the first time, she trusted the ground beneath her feet. And somewhere between the signature on the page and the first flash of cameras, both of them realized the rules were no longer as solid as they pretended. The gala hall glowed with light and quiet judgment. Crystal chandeliers reflected off polished marble floors, and the air carried the faint scent of expensive perfume and old-money confidence. Conversations overlapped in careful tones, every laugh measured, every glance deliberate. Ethan Blackwood entered with his contract wife at his side. The cameras noticed immediately. Flashes popped. Heads turned. Whispers followed them like a current. "This is the wife," someone murmured. "The one who appeared out of nowhere. Do we know anything about her?" She heard it all, but she did not slow her step. Her hand rested lightly on Ethan's arm, posture straight, shoulders back, exactly as she had practiced. Not stiff, not defiant, present. Ethan felt the shift before he understood it. Normally, these events exhausted him. Every interaction was a transaction, every smile an evaluation. Tonight, however, something was different. She did not cling. She did not shrink. She stood beside him as if she belonged there, not because of the name she carried for 3 months, but because she refused to apologize for existing. The first test came quickly. A senior board member approached, glass of whiskey in hand, smile sharp but eyes colder. "Ethan," the man said, "we were surprised you did not consult us before marrying." Ethan opened his mouth, already prepared to deflect. She spoke first. "I understand the concern," she said calmly. "If I were in your position, I would want stability as well." The man blinked, thrown off by her tone. "But stability," she continued, "does not come from predictability. It comes from trust. And my husband has never failed this company." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Curious. Ethan turned his head slightly, just enough to look at her. She did not look at him for approval. She looked directly at the board member, steady and respectful. "Well said," the man replied after a moment, lifting his glass. "Welcome to the family." That was the first win. The second came from his aunt. A woman known for dismantling reputations with gentle smiles approached them near the balcony. "So," she said lightly, eyes sweeping over her, "what does your family do?" The question was loaded. It always was. She did not flinch. "My mother runs a tailoring shop," she said. "She encourages people to fix what they love instead of replacing it." Now mine. A pause. "That philosophy," she added, "is something I admire deeply." The aunt studied her, then laughed softly. "How refreshing," she said. "Most people here prefer disposal." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. He had expected defense. Deflection. Instead, she offered dignity. As the evening unfolded, she continued to navigate the room with quiet intelligence. She remembered names, asked questions, listened more than she spoke. When someone tried to corner her with veiled insults, she responded with grace that left no opening for cruelty. By the time the orchestra began to play, the whispers had changed. "She is composed. She is not what I expected." Some the honor. He chose well. Ethan stood beside her, absorbing it all. This was not performance. This was competence. On the terrace, away from the noise, he finally spoke. "You handled that better than my public relations team ever could." My claiming self unvisor. She exhaled, the tension leaving her shoulders. "I just told the truth." He studied her profile under the city lights. "That is rare in this room." She met his gaze then. "You gave me space to speak." "I did not plan to," he admitted. A faint smile touched her lips. "Then maybe this arrangement is already changing." Ethan did not answer, because for the first time, he realized the board was no longer watching to see if she would fail. They were watching to see if she would stay, and that realization unsettled him far more than any contract ever had. They did not leave the gala together, not at first. Ethan was pulled into a tight circle of board members congratulating him on the evening, their approval now thinly disguised as relief. Deals were mentioned. Meetings scheduled. Futures aligned. He answered automatically, his mind only half present. Across the room, his contract wife stood near the windows, hands clasped around a glass of water she had not touched. From a distance, she looked calm, collected, but when Ethan finally excused himself and crossed the room toward her, he noticed the small signs. The way her shoulders dropped the moment she saw him. The quiet release of breath she had been holding all night. "You survived," he said. She let out a soft laugh. "Barely." They stepped into the hallway, away from the noise and eyes. The doors closed behind them, sealing the silence. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she leaned back against the wall, head tilting slightly, as if the weight of the evening had finally reached her. "Was that enough?" she asked. "For them?" Ethan studied her. "Yes," he said. "More than enough." She nodded, absorbing the words. "Good." He hesitated. This was not part of the script. There was no clause for this moment. "You did not have to defend me," she said quietly. "I did," he replied. The answer surprised both of them. She turned her head, meeting his eyes fully now. "Why?" "Because you deserved it," hovered on his tongue. "Because you are not disposable. Because you made them listen." "Instead," he said, "because you were right." That seemed to unsettle her more than praise. They walked out into the night air together, the city stretching below them, lights flickering like distant signals. The noise from the gala faded behind glass doors. For the first time since the contract began, there was no performance waiting on the other side. "Do you ever get tired?" she asked suddenly. Ethan frowned slightly. "Of what?" "Of always being the strongest person in the room," she said. "Of never showing weakness, because everyone is waiting for it." He considered lying. He did not. "Yes," he said. "Every day." She nodded, as if that answer mattered. "I am tired too," she admitted. "Of being invisible until I am useful." 80. I selled. The honesty between them felt fragile. Unplanned. Dangerous. Ethan leaned his forearms against the railing, staring out at the city. "This was supposed to be simple," he said. "A solution. A timeline. An ending. And now?" she asked. "And now," he said slowly, "I'm not sure where the lines are anymore." She was quiet for a moment. "The contract gives us rules," she said, "but it does not give us trust." He turned to her. "Do you think trust can exist inside an arrangement like this?" She met his gaze steadily. "I think trust begins when someone chooses to protect you when they do not have to." The words landed heavily. They stood there longer than necessary, close enough to feel the presence of the other without touching. Close enough for the memory of broken glass and instinctive arms to resurface. She broke the silence first. "We should go home," she said, "before someone wonders where we disappeared to." "I, in sins, with one of Benedict." Ethan straightened. The CEO mask slid back into place, but it felt looser now. "Yes," he said, "we should." In the car ride back to the mansion, the city lights passed in a blur. She watched them quietly, hands folded in her lap. Ethan kept his gaze forward, aware of every inch of space between them. When the car stopped and the doors closed behind them, the house felt different. Less like a stage, more like a shared space. "Good night," she said softly, pausing at the stairs. "Good night," Ethan replied. She hesitated, then added, "Thank you. For tonight." He nodded. "Thank you for standing your ground." She disappeared up the stairs, leaving him alone in the quiet. Ethan remained where he was, listening to the fading sound of her footsteps. The contract had done its job, but for the first time, he wondered if it was also delaying something neither of them were ready to name. The storm arrived just after midnight. Thunder rolled low over the city, not loud enough to wake the household, but persistent enough to pull Ethan from sleep. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain begin to strike the windows in slow, deliberate taps. He had learned long ago not to fight insomnia. Instead, he got up. The mansion was quiet. Lights dimmed automatically to night mode. Ethan moved through the hallway barefoot, jacket draped over his arm, the weight of the evening still sitting in his chest. As he passed the guest wing, he noticed light spilling from beneath her door. He stopped. This was not part of the arrangement. Neither was knocking on her door at midnight, but something in him resisted walking away. He raised his hand, hesitated, then knocked once. The door opened a few inches. "Yes?" she asked softly, her voice cautious. I heard the storm, he said. It sounded inadequate even to him. I wanted to make sure you were all right. She studied his face for a moment, then stepped aside. You can come in. Her room was simple compared to the rest of the house. No excess, no unnecessary decoration, just clean lines, a lamp on the desk, and a chair pulled close to the window where rain streaked down the glass. She sat on the edge of the bed, folding her hands in her lap. Ethan remained standing, uncertain where to place himself. I do not like storms, she admitted. They make everything feel unstable. Ethan nodded slowly. I understand that feeling. The thunder rolled again, closer this time. She glanced toward the window, then back at him. When I was a child, my mother would sit with me until it passed. She said storms only sound powerful because they have nothing solid to hold on to. The words lingered between them. Ethan moved to the chair by the window and sat, elbows resting on his knees. I have always been expected to be solid, he said quietly, unmoving, reliable, strong enough to absorb everyone else's fear. She listened without interrupting. There was never room for uncertainty, he continued. Not after my father died. Not after the company nearly collapsed. Weakness was not forgiven. She tilted her head slightly. And now, he said, I realize I do not know how to stop being that person. Even when I am exhausted. The confession surprised him. He had not planned to say it. He had not said anything like it in years. She stood and moved closer, not touching, but near enough that her presence felt steady. You do not have to be strong in this room, she said. I am not evaluating you. The thunder faded into a low rumble. Ethan let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt different than before. Not tense, not cautious. Honest. I keep thinking about the contract, she said softly. About how clearly it defines everything. He looked up at her. And sometimes I wonder if we hide behind it, she said, because it feels safer than admitting when something changes. Ethan stood slowly, careful to keep his distance. I never intended to make you feel hidden, he said. I know, she replied, but intention does not always protect people. By their present danger, another roll of thunder echoed in the distance, weaker now. She wrapped her arms around herself. I agreed to this because I needed stability. A solution. Just like you. And now? Ethan asked. And now I'm afraid that I am starting to care what happens after the contract ends. The words settled between them, heavy and unguarded. Ethan felt the pull again. The instinct to close the space between them. To reach out, he did not. Instead, he said, I am afraid of that too. She looked at him, eyes searching his face for something he had not offered anyone in a long time. Then maybe, she said carefully, we should be honest when we cross a line, even if we do not act on it. Ethan nodded once. That seems fair. The storm outside began to move away, rain softening against the glass. She stepped back, giving him space again. Thank you for checking on me. Thank you for letting me stay, he replied. At the door, he paused. Good night, he said. Good night, Ethan. He returned to his room, the quiet closing around him once more. But this time, the silence did not feel empty. It felt like something waiting. And for the first time since the contract was signed, Ethan wondered whether the most dangerous part of this arrangement was not breaking the rules. It was surviving them without changing at all. The article went live at 8:47 in the morning. Ethan saw it between meetings, his phone vibrating sharply against the conference table. He glanced down, expecting another market alert. Instead, he saw the headline, Billionaire CEO's marriage exposed as contractual arrangement. Below it, a blurred photograph taken outside the gala venue. His hand on her back, her face turned away. He stood up so abruptly the room fell silent. 5 minutes, he said, already walking out. In the hallway, he opened the article fully. The language was surgical, not cruel. Worse. Precise. Anonymous sources. Signed documents. A timeline. Someone had scanned the contract. Clause by clause. No intimacy. Public appearances. Confidentiality. Ethan's chest tightened. He did not need to ask who did this. The board member who had smiled too easily. The aunt who asked too many questions. The system correcting what it considered an error. He dialed his legal counsel. No answer. He called his assistant. Straight to voicemail. By the time he reached the mansion, the damage was already spreading. She stood in the living room, her phone in her hand, face pale but composed. The television behind her replayed the story on a loop. She did not look up when he entered. "They are calling it a performance marriage," she said quietly. "Some of them are kinder, some are not. I will handle this," Ethan said immediately. "I will shut it down. Mormons, any two." She finally turned to him. Her expression was calm, but something behind it had closed. "It is already handled," she said. "They know." Her phone buzzed again. She silenced it without looking. "My mother's shop has reporters outside," she continued. "They want to know how much she was paid to raise a daughter who could be rented." The words hit harder than any accusation. Ethan stepped toward her. "I never intended for this to touch your family." "I know," she said. "But intention does not stop consequences. His are like to grass, and this is activier." Silence stretched between them. "I can make a statement," he said. "I can say the marriage is real. That the contract was preliminary. I can say—" "Lie?" she asked gently. He stopped. "I will not be your damage control," she said. "Not like this." She set the phone down on the table with deliberate care. "When I signed that contract, I agreed to be invisible," she continued. "I agreed to rules, to boundaries, to being temporary. What I did not agree to was being reduced to a headline." "And one." Ethan searched her face, looking for the woman from the balcony, from the storm-lit room. "I will fix this," he said again, more quietly. She shook her head. "You cannot fix what was built to protect you." She moved past him, toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To leave," she replied. The word echoed through the room. "You cannot," he said automatically. "The contract—" She stopped, turned. "The contract requires public appearances," she said. "It does not require me to stay when my dignity is gone." Ethan felt something crack fully this time. "I need time," she said. "Time away from this house, from the noise, from being defined by something I did not write." He took a step closer. "Do not go like this." Her voice softened, just slightly. "This is the only way I can go." Minutes later, she walked out with a single suitcase. No drama, no raised voices. Just the quiet finality of choice. Ethan stood at the window as her car disappeared down the drive. The contract lay open on the table behind him, pages fluttering slightly in the air conditioning. For months, it had protected him. Now, it had taken something from him he had never listed as collateral. And for the first time, Ethan Blackwood understood that the real cost of this arrangement was not public scandal. It was watching the one person who never treated him like a transaction walk away because of it. The emergency board meeting was called within 48 hours. No cameras were allowed inside, but everyone knew it was happening. The stock dipped slightly that morning, not enough to cause panic, just enough to remind Ethan Blackwood that the system was watching. Waiting, he entered the boardroom alone. The long table gleamed under white lights, faces familiar and carefully neutral. Men and women who had known him since childhood, who had shaken his hand after his father's funeral, who believed they understood him. The chairman spoke first. "This situation has become a liability," he said evenly. "The contract marriage has damaged public trust." Ethan did not sit. "I agree," he said. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. "We need a clean resolution," the chairman continued. "An annulment, a statement clarifying that the arrangement has ended. You distance yourself, and the market will stabilize." Ethan looked around the table. "You want me to erase her," he said. "We want you to protect the company," another voice added. "That is your responsibility." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. Then he reached into his jacket and placed a folder on the table. "This is my responsibility," he said calmly. The chairman frowned. "What is this?" "My revised decision," Ethan replied. He opened the folder and slid a single document forward. The contract. Only now, it was marked across the top in bold ink. "Terminated." Gasps followed. Questions rose. Objections layered over one another. "You cannot do this unilaterally," someone said. "I can," Ethan replied. "And I have." The room fell silent. "I entered that contract to satisfy you," he continued. "To maintain control. To avoid vulnerability. But in doing so, I allowed someone else to be exposed for my protection." He paused, choosing each word. "That ends today." The chairman leaned forward. If you proceed like this, you risk your position. Ethan met his gaze steadily. Then I accept that risk. The words landed heavier than any threat. I will issue a public statement, Ethan said. Not denying the contract, not rewriting it, but taking responsibility for it. And her? The chairman asked. Ethan did not hesitate. I will apologize, he said, publicly and privately, and I will not ask her to return to anything she did not choose freely. And Teen too. The meeting ended without applause, without agreement, but Ethan walked out lighter than he had in years. That afternoon, his statement went live. He did not blame the press. He did not hide behind legal language. He spoke plainly. I entered a contractual marriage for strategic reasons. In doing so, I failed to protect the dignity of the woman involved. That failure is mine alone. The media reacted instantly. Shock, debate, division. But the narrative shifted. Not a scandal. A reckoning. That evening, Ethan drove alone to the small apartment she had rented under her own name. No security detail. No announcement. He stood outside for a full minute before knocking. When the door opened, she looked surprised, but not guarded. I am not here to ask you back, he said immediately. I am here to say this face to face. She waited. I ended the contract, he said. Completely. And I told them the truth. Her breath caught, just slightly. You did not have to do that, she said. I did, he replied. Because I was wrong. Silence filled the space between them. I am not asking for forgiveness, Ethan continued. And I am not asking you to return. I only wanted you to know that I chose you over the arrangement. Finally, she studied his face for a long moment. Then she said, quietly, that is the first honest thing you have given me. Ethan nodded. It will not be the last. If you ever decide you want more than silence between us. She did not answer right away. But she did not close the door either. And for Ethan Blackwood, that was enough to wait. 3 weeks passed. No headlines followed her name anymore. The story had moved on, as stories always did. The market stabilized. The board adjusted. Blackwood Industries continued, slightly changed, quietly recalibrated. And Ethan Blackwood did not call, not because he did not want to, but because he had promised himself that if this ever became real, it would begin without pressure, without leverage, without a contract disguised as care. She noticed the absence more than she expected. Life settled into a different rhythm. Her mother's tailoring shop reopened without cameras outside the door. Orders came in slowly at first, then steadily. People wanted repairs, not spectacle. Continuity, not scandal. One evening, as she locked the shop and turned the sign to closed, she found an envelope resting against the glass. No logo, no seal, just her name, written carefully. Inside was a single key. Attached to it was a small card. This is not an obligation. It is an invitation. Use it only if you choose to. Below it was an address. She recognized it immediately. The townhouse on Harbor Street. The one Ethan had purchased years ago but never lived in. Too modest, the board once said. Too human. That night, she stood outside the door for a long moment before unlocking it. Inside, the space was warm and quiet. No staff, no grandeur. Just light wood floors, books stacked instead of displayed, and a table set for two. Ethan stood by the window. Jacket off. Sleeves rolled up. You came, he said softly. I chose to, she replied. He nodded, accepting the difference. They sat across from each other. The distance deliberate. I did not bring a contract, Ethan said. And I will not offer terms. She smiled faintly. That is new. I am new, he said simply. They talked. About ordinary things. About mistakes. About fear. About what it meant to stay when no one was watching. At the end of the night, Ethan reached into his pocket and placed something on the table. Not a ring. A folded piece of paper. She opened it. It was the contract. Only now, every clause was crossed out by hand. At the bottom, a single line remained. If two people choose each other freely, everything else is negotiable. She looked up at him. Eyes steady. No conditions? She asked. No conditions, Ethan said. No timelines, no public appearances. Just this question. He met her gaze fully. Would you like to stay? Why? She considered it carefully. Then she reached for the key in her pocket and placed it beside the paper. Yes, she said. But not as your wife on paper. Ethan smiled, slow and genuine. As my partner, he replied. She nodded. As your equal. Outside, the city lights reflected against the window, steady and unremarkable. No cameras, no witnesses, no contract. Just two people choosing to remain. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Blackwood understood that the strongest agreement he had ever made was not written, signed, or enforced. It was honored. By staying.